Joining me today is Nikki Nash, author of Collateral, Stardust, Chasing Warren Beatty and Other Foolish Things. At 14, longing for excitement and something of her own, Nikki Nash fixates on superstar Warren Beatty. She's determined to find him and have fun and find him and have him in her life forever. She creates a solid plan that she initiates 4 years later, at the age of 18, when she gets a job at a restaurant hostess as a restaurant hostess where Beatty frequents. A year later, on a warm, sunny evening, or a warm, sunny Sunday evening in April, after breaking a finger in a judo class and looking her worst, dirty hair pulled back, no makeup on, broken finger, in a glass, in a glass of ice, Warren Beatty walks through the door and her plan comes to fruition. In this entertaining and genuine account of the inner workings of Hollywood, Nikki pursues a vibrant career as a TV associate, director, comic, writer, and actress. Her celebrity-infused journey is also a dance with drugs, religion, Hollywood culture, and other volatile mysteries in the City of Angels. Nikki ended up becoming an associate director on a variety of shows, including Soul Train, Love Connection, Jimmy Kimmel, and Conan. Welcome to the show, Nikki. Nice to have you on today.
Oh, thanks, Kathryn. It's good to be here.
Well, you lead or have led, or I hope you're continuing, obviously, to lead the exciting life that everybody dreams of. And so I guess the question is, well, how did you do it? You know, you're a risk taker. Okay, so you're in love with Warren Beatty. You have this crush, and he walks. So as I described, I don't want to repeat the intro, but I can't, I want to give us the picture of how like he walked in the room and suddenly you were able to connect and then all of this exciting stuff happened to you in Hollywood.
Yeah, I guess, primarily I was lonely growing up in a kind of bohemian childhood. And when I saw him in a movie, I thought this will be the thing to pull me through life. This will be the future love that will make up for now where I felt lonely. So yeah, when he walked in, I was saying, I've waited, 4 years for this, and now I look horrible and I don't want to meet him. But I went over and he introduced himself, which was pretty obvious who he was. And that was it. And I thought, was that my year and a half here working, waiting for him? And now it's over. But he came in again about 2 weeks later and remembered me. And it went from there.
He came in 2 weeks later, he remembered you, but there has to be something about you, right? I mean, we're talking about him and your crush or your crush on him, as I call it a crush, but what was it about you, do you think, attracted you to him?
That's interesting because in retrospect, I could, sometimes we find the things in our life maybe that we believe will help us in some way, even though we don't know why. And for some reason, I picked him. He was always receptive to me and always took my calls. So it was a great way to start practicing how to be a human being in a way that I hadn't before. I was always pretty careful with what I said, but somehow with him, I developed a way of just telling him the truth. And since he never went away, it gave me good practice in becoming the real person that I would be, ironically.
Well, has he read your book?
He has. I gave it to him a couple years ago, and he read it, and he had some notes for me, which I thought were valid notes, and I incorporated them into the book. And I appreciate him always being there for me, even if it wasn't some huge love affair. It was definitely a relationship.
Okay, so what would you say to, we'll say young people today, because things are very different now, right? With internet and YouTube, all of those kinds of things. Can the same thing happen today, or does it happen in a different way?
I would think would happen in a different way if if someone was obsessed with someone and wanted to pursue them. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that people stalk these
I was
days,
going to
and I
say, you
would
don't want to be a stalker, but
no, no. What I would say to young people, and this is maybe a little off point, but that in writing this book, I exposed who I truly am, which is a big risk because some of us don't know if we're lovable or not, just being ourselves. And it takes some trust and work to eventually get there. And I would say for young people, I have a certain empathy that there is so much exposure and so many filters that can be used. And I don't know what that's doing to a young woman to think, is she getting attention for this fabricated person she's presented, because that's a hard thing to unbutton. On the other hand, I don't know. I didn't grow up with the internet, so maybe their brains are very satisfied and happy with this kind of exchange. But I worry about that. I worry that we aren't our real selves.
Yeah, well, there's a vulnerable, you mentioned, for you, I mean, there was a vulnerability in writing the book, but I think, as you say, today, there's just so much exposure and with all of us actually online, that whole vulnerability thing comes into play, which is kind of scary, actually. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, so you got into the business, obviously. Hollywood is your business, and you were very successful. What do you th why do you, I guess, because what people really want to know, or younger people, well, what made you so successful? I mean, how did you do it? Like, tell us the secret.
Yeah, some is just hard work and coincidence or luck, but hard work. The sequence for me was after my Warren Beatty obsession came to fruition and we were in a relationship. I knew it was time to stop working at the restaurant where I went to meet him. So I had a couple of crappy jobs, and then my father, a trombone player, worked with another trombone player whose wife was a TV producer. And so I needed a job, and he bugged his friend who said, no, no, she's tired of having to meet people's friends and children. But somehow my dad was incredibly pushy, and I met this producer and sort of won her over. And that was when I got hired on Mary Hartman. But that's like circumstantial. There are ways in. And I will say one thing is the value of internship and being an assistant, like at a lower rung position, because I think some people think they need to move ahead from that has no value. But from my experience and all my friends who work in TV, if you're a good intern, if you're smart, if you do what you're asked to do, if you are curious, if you find out other, elements of the job that you're doing, other people's jobs, you'll be noticed. And you may not know it right away because it's a busy environment, but I'm still friends with a few of the interns, from 20 years ago that are now going to law school and that just really worked hard. And that's an appreciated thing. So I would say if you get your foot in the door, just keep working hard at it.
Yeah, like, well, what is it? Woody Allen, just show up for whatever it is, right? Just be there.
Yeah,
And I think also as an intern, today I think a lot of younger people want to actually start at the top.
right.
Rather
Yeah.
than being I think you describe it somewhere either in your book, you start out as a gopher, but then no one's paying attention to you either, and you have an opportunity to kind of get a whole overview of what's happening, right? Without having the focus on you, but you get all
Yeah.
this information, besides, the mentoring and stuff. But you talk about Louise Lasser, she was my idol. I mean, she was Mary Hartman, Mary Hartman.
So
Was
you love that show?
I loved that show. I had a girlfriend. After every episode, we call each other up and discuss it. I mean, that was the kind of humor that was like cutting edge, right?
Oh,
In those days.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was genius. There was no laugh track,
yeah,
and it was very, very strange. And yes, just strange. Remember Sergeant Foley? My mom had a
yes,
huge crush on him.
yeah. I mean, I remember there was an episode, Condos for Christ. I don't know why I remember that one. I mean, it was so irreverent. I mean, maybe, but then, yeah.
Yes.
That was,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah.
It was really cutting edge, really ahead of its time. And you mentioned, doing multiple jobs there. I stayed late, and whenever I had to copy something on the copy machine, I would copy an extra one for me and of anything, budgets, scripts, and then I would just stay late and read everything. And I learned what an associate director does, what post-production is. But to go back to your point of, it's a faster time now, I think we see, we get examples of people making it or whatever on the internet and think I have to get there, and maybe they can, but in the tangible, sensual world, there are things that need to be learned by doing. So
Let's talk about, because I know you had, is the word tumultuous? I'm not sure that is growing up. I mean, you're talking about your father who was the musician who got you the job and everything, but you grew up with what? The Black Panthers. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, all this stuff that yeah, so tell us how about that and then how that impacted your trajectory and where you are now.
Yeah, that's I grew up in the Valley, which was not too far from Hollywood. The trombone playing father. My mother was sort of a political revolutionary and very smart and very funny. I also think she was probably born at the wrong time as a 50s housewife. She was kind of frustrated, and but so she got into politics, and we had these parties between the musicians, the jazz musicians, the movie directors, the actors, the Black Panthers, the fundraisers for all these various things. There were just these weekend parties that would go on, and just dancing and alcohol and
Drugs?
questionable sexuality, who knows. Drugs, yeah,
Yeah,
not so
everything.
much, not so
No.
much. There's just a lot of drinking that I saw. I mean, maybe there was something else going on, but yeah, the FBI would drive by and take license plates to try to keep track of all these revolutionary figures and conspiracy theorists. So it was all very exciting. But Monday morning, my brothers and I would wake up and step over bodies that were all asleep in the living room and get our instant breakfast and walk to school. So it was a weird mix of loneliness and excitement.
Yeah, loneliness and excitement. Very interesting. I mean, I don't think that that probably happens so much today. That's a different kind of a Hollywood, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. People needed to get together physically to keep the message going, or to make plans for sit-ins or protests or whatever. There was no email. There wasn't like, let's all meet here. It all kind of started at big parties and then making plans. So it was it was a slower process maybe, but it was certainly a rich process.
And I think you write about, or you talk about at least, that LA is really the only place that this could happen, or that it's a very unique city, and all of what, you've been talking about is very special to LA. Wouldn't have
Yes.
happened in the same way in New York or Chicago or Miami.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think so. And I joke that it was probably easier for me to have my obsession with Warren Beatty, considering I was only a few miles away from his hotel. If I was in Wisconsin, it would probably be harder.
It would be very difficult if you were in
Yeah.
Wisconsin or Montana or wherever, right? No.
Yeah.
Well, you were lucky to be where you were, I would say. No, it's exciting. But then you also had stuff happen to you. I mean, you talk about bulimia, which is a huge problem today. So how did that, I guess, happen to you? I don't know if it happens to you, but
Yeah, right. Well, I
yeah,
know you do a lot of work with people in this area, which is so
yeah.
great to hear about, because it's, and that's why I wanted to talk about it, because there's some shame and embarrassment maybe, but there's so many young women that probably would like to know that it's, it didn't kill me, and people know about it, and it's just fine. But I think as a teenager, because of the loneliness and excitement, there was some the self comfort that would come from food. Um, And, I discovered Ipecac, and I asked my mom what it was. It was in the cabinet, and she said it's in case you eat poison, you'd vomit. I thought, hey, this is the answer. So,
Yeah.
one evening I just drank some of it, and I sat down and I told everyone, and my brother Billy, who's so reverent, he goes, well, don't sit next to me, thinking I was going to
Yeah.
throw up on him. And then but that's where the split begins. As you probably know, about the secret behavior and what you present, because a lot of, I would live my life and then I would go home and binge eat. And people didn't know that about me. And it's hard to have real relationships when you just can't wait to get away from them and fuel yourself.
I always and didn't realize it at the time. I went to boarding school, and boarding school, you do a lot of eating and gaining weight. And because you're kind of stuck in this, in the days that I went anyway, there wasn't a lot of freedom to get out of the
Mm.
school. And there was one girl there she had a great figure, really attractive. She was eating along with the rest of us, but she never at the end of the semester gained any weight. She always looked great. And then I found out later that, yeah, she was suffering from bulimia.
Did that have an effect on you to get into that line of help and research later on?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously it was a lot of, I mean, that was part of what I did when I was uh, practicing social work, but somehow, yeah, I don't know that that was a direct line, but yes, I mean, I thought about her. Um, and it did, I guess the answer would be yes, it did spark my interest, but
Yeah, maybe it was the exposure.
the exposure, yeah, on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah. Jeez.
But yeah, so yeah, that was, but now I'm kind of fast forward, but I want to talk about, like I said, I guess in the beginning, you're on Conan, I mean, let's talk about the people now you've been involved with in your career and how all of what you did do led up to this.
Well, I feel incredibly fortunate, and as I say, I did work hard. I kind of never called in sick. I never went home early. So whether that was just a work ethic I got from my father or uh, a way of making sure nobody was mad at me, I don't know. But it served me well. And I was with Conan the last 12 years, and it was the best job. When you work in TV, there are different kinds, like late night comedy or daytime game shows or morning talk shows, and there's like a family of people that do those specific types of shows. So when you would go from a show to a show to a show, you'd still see a lot of the same people, same audio guys, stage managers. And so it was very familial. It was just a lovely place to have friends that worked really hard, that had great senses of humor. And I just feel incredibly lucky that this is where I got to spend my working years with, funny, fun, smart people and hard work.
Yeah, funny, fun, smart people and people with that kind of humor, the Mary Hartman humor, Jimmy Kimmel, Conan, all of those people. But then you use the word lucky. Is it really lucky? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not downplaying it. I think it takes also a lot of saying yes. And, in my book, I said yes to pretty much everything. But
mhm.
I also, in my work life, if I got called to do a job and I was free, I would say yes, even if it was hard or I needed to learn something quickly. And I was very responsible. So I think I don't downplay it, but I had a reputation for being able to deliver, to show up, and take care of what needed to be done. So, and I was fun to be around.
Yeah.
So it was,
Yeah, you have to be fun to be around. And I think as you age, you have to even be more fun because uh, you have to really work at it. But you were the go-to person. Like if you need something done, ask Nikki, she'll do it and she'll do it right.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because so not really necessarily lucky, but okay, I'm going now, maybe I'm going back and forth, but you also had a drinking problem.
Oh, it's just a big party with me, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah, that just sort of, who knows, like even with the lucky thing that you asked, some is nurture, some is nature, some, if we're born with our own sense of self, no matter what the family situation is, I think some of those things come through. But I think physically too, I was probably predisposed to alcohol. One brother was a heroin addict. And so we had our addictions, and alcohol's tricky because you can be smart, successful, work hard, friendly, have friends, but alcohol just requires more alcohol. And yeah, it was a problem, and it was also secretive.
And I think today I don't think there was this term, let's say, 20, 30 years ago, but high functioning alcoholic
Mm,
is a popular term. People who,
yes,
yeah. And also there's a lot of denial, I guess, too, because you can say, well, I can do all of this, so I don't really have a drinking problem. Not necessarily.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is,
My mom used to say she didn't have a drinking problem because she didn't drink in the morning, but she didn't get up until 2 in the afternoon.
yeah,
So anyway,
that was her excuse, right?
yeah, yeah, and it doesn't alcohol that really doesn't help the problems it's trying to help, because I was still lonely, and that was, I think the hardest thing is to give up those things and then find out if you really are lovable, to bring it down to its basics, and to risk integrating the unreconciled parts of yourself, the embarrassed part, the shy part, the interested in others part. I mean, it was, and writing this book did that too. It finally, it's like, this is me, and I no big deal, and now I feel much more open to the world.
When you talk about lovable and likable, because I think you mentioned that kind of several times in the interview. So there was whole thing not feeling like you were lovable and not lovable and likable. It's lovable and lonely. That's what, right? Um,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's, if you don't present who you are, then a person who's responding to you, you don't know if it's real or not. So it doesn't really get in. It's like being laminated.
And people would say, listening to your story and reading your book, it's always like, how could you be lonely? I mean, I'm thinking about just in what we've been talking about, all the stuff you've done and the people that you've come in contact with and the success, and yet one can still feel lonely or not lovable.
Yes, yes. I didn't set out to write the book as any kind of message. I mean, I worked on it very hard, and there's my own theme, but so many people are coming to me with that, and telling me stories from their own childhood, and maybe feel I'm a safe space, or a safe harbor for their unspoken secrets. And it's been even more of a gift and a blessing to have people read this book, and then come to me and just want to talk about things.
I mean, does that surprise you or did it surprise you?
I think I was neutral. I mean, I knew the book was good, and it meant a lot to me, and many people that had read it and helped me, drafts and all that. But I think it's, yes, I think when men in their late 60s and 70s that I don't know feel compelled to write me an email about how moved they were by my book, it just makes me want to cry. It's just so lovely.
Well, you are likable and lovable, especially if men in their 60s and 70s are writing to you.
Yeah. Yes.
That's pretty good.
I know. I like it.
Yeah. Um, okay, so now I think actually your PR people had said you are skydiving or you've tried skydiving. Do you skydive on a
I did try it.
yeah.
It
And
was still when I was drinking, but I had 18 jumps, and broke my leg on my last jump, and had kind of a near death experience halfway through when I fell off the plane accidentally. and just was tumbling and tumbling and tumbling. But I wouldn't do
Wait,
it
you fell
now.
off the plane accidentally, but you had a parachute, right? Don't stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a parachute, but when you're supposed to, go out of the plane, you have to arch so you're stable and then pull your chute so it doesn't wrap around you. But I was supposed to be hanging on to the strut and then getting ready to let go, but I slipped. I slipped off, and I was a neophyte, so I'm still just tumbling, tumbling. And then I realized, oh, arch. The last second I arched and then opened my chute. And clearly I lived, but it was it was
Yeah,
pretty scary.
you live to tell the story. Oh, I mean, there's so many exciting things. I mean, there's so much in your book, obviously. We only have a couple minutes left. We've touched on a few things, but obviously want people to go out there, get the book. So tell us where we can do that, and also follow you, whatever else you're doing, other platforms we can go to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I think the primary one would be nikkinash.com, which is NIKKI nikkinash.com, because I have my books there and some paintings, um, and also links to where the book is and reviews and some media stuff I've done. So pretty much everything's there. I'm on Facebook, but I don't really use it as a huge anything. So
So don't go there.
well, yeah, go there, but
We can,
or
but it's not
not.
that interesting. That's
I
not
don't know.
okay.
I mean, whatever makes people happy. But I think the primary thing would be my website.
Great, good. Great talking to you today. What
Well,
an
great
interesting,
questions.
yeah, interesting life, an interesting person, I do have to say, Nikki.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate that you took the time to talk to me.
thank you. We'll talk to you again.
Okay.
Okay. Joining me today is author Suzanne Perry. Her new book is The Communist Secret. Driven by a blind devotion to the Communist Party, self-centered Katya Karavaya Viva, and I'm not pronouncing that correctly, but you can correct me, Suzanne, later, has broken the most important rule in Soviet society. Never say anything that can be used against you. On the heels of that betrayal, Nazi Germany invades and the Soviet Union mobilizes. Katya hopes to halt her downward spiral by joining the volunteer militia, but within a few short weeks finds herself under attack. After escaping with another volunteer, Katya spends weeks on the run before landing in a town under Nazi occupation. There she finds a place and a purpose and learns to fight a different kind of war, repaying German brutality with a harsh justice of her own. Suzanne Perry is a former arms control negotiator turned historical novelist. She studied Russian in Moscow and worked for the U.S. Department of Defense. And while at the Pentagon, she helped negotiate the first international security agreement of the Gorbachev era. Great. Welcome to the show, Suzanne.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. Thanks for that nice introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here.
Well, maybe we need you now, don't we? I mean, that last, I mean,
Well, there
yeah.
there are people much smarter than me out there, so but I wish some of them would somehow have more power and influence, I guess.
Well, they might be smarter, but I doubt that. But even if they are, they don't have the experience that you've had. Let's talk about that because obviously that experience was what motivated you, I assume, to write the book, right?
That's exactly right. I really have one really large motivation, and that is to write historical novels that will, in fact, do a tiny bit to strengthen democracy by pointing out how bad dictatorship really is. And World War II is a very popular genre in historical fiction, and very little is written about the former Soviet Union, about Soviet Russia during the war. So I saw my background provided me with enough experience that I felt as though I could write with some authenticity about that time and place. And that's really, really why I do what I do. And yes, I got started, I mean, decades ago in college. I was a Russian language and political science major, and I had the amazing opportunity to spend my last college semester in Moscow with a small group of other American and Canadian undergraduates studying Russian language. And, to be able to really get a feel for what the culture is like, what Russians themselves are like, it does require some immersion. And although I was only there for a few months, I still just got so much in the way of firsthand experience. I would be walking down the street with a couple of other students. We would speak English, even though we weren't supposed to, but we did. And we did, in part, one, it was easier, of course, for us, but also people on the street would hear us speaking English and they would come up to us. Russians would come up to us every day, just about. Sometimes they wanted to practice their English, but sometimes they wanted to talk about America, what it was like. They would invite us to their apartments, these small kommunalkas, small apartments, that shared apartments, essentially. So that background, and then having the opportunity later after graduate school to work at the Pentagon and actually negotiate with the Soviets was, also a really important, provided a lot of the framework, I would say, for my ability to write about Soviet Russia. So,
I was in Russia and with a group in the 90s, and most people didn't, you talk about people coming up on the street and wanting to talk to you in English. Not too many people spoke English. We got lost, a couple of us at one point, and kind of really got scared because we couldn't, obviously it was difficult. You can't read, we couldn't read the maps. We
yeah.
we were like stuck, and and then found I saw this Irish shamrock on top of a bar, and I said, let's go in there. I'm sure somebody will speak English, which they did. There were a lot of college students in there, but still at that time, not a lot of people spoke English. So
No, that's very, very true. This was 1979 when I was a
yeah.
student there, and people would come up to us and they would hear us speaking English and they would attempt to use a few words or a phrase they might have learned in school. All of our conversations took place in Russian with locals. I mean, we could not have any detailed conversations in English because so few had really studied English to the degree that would allow them that kind of fluency. And we were moderately fluent, I would say, different degrees. There were a few in the group who spoke almost perfect Russian, and then there were others of us who could get along, who could get by. But it was really a unique and terrific experience. And in fact, even if they didn't speak much English, people would approach us because they recognized, or that we were.
You looked odd.
English. Yeah. Well, not so much the way we dressed or anything, but just speaking another language. It was a rarity in Moscow, right? I mean, you didn't hear people on the street speaking other languages. It's nothing like a big city in the United States today where, I mean, I live in Washington, D.C., and I hear 3 or 4 languages just in the first few blocks I'm walking on the street, So it was nothing like that. Yeah.
But so because, it's interesting, you talk about how important it is to immerse yourself, even if it's only a semester or, a few months in another country, to have an understanding of how just of the people and the way things operate on a daily basis. But so what does that say about today? Because now no one, or very few people are going or have the experience of going to Russia, let's say. That's a good example. What does that do to our psyche and how we view people, or
Yeah,
we view the
I mean,
Russians
I
and how
do
they
think
view us?
that,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding, very much on both sides. The US, I mean, I think Americans don't understand Russia and Russians very well. And I think the same is absolutely true in Russia. And there are different reasons for that, though. In Russia, Vladimir Putin has an intense campaign of propaganda against the United States and the West, and he controls the media in the country. There is no open information. So the people hear what he wants them to hear. And this has been going on now. I mean, he's been in power 25 years, and he started fairly quickly after he became president with this kind of propaganda. And it works. If you repeat something often enough, it becomes the truth. In fact, it was Vladimir Lenin who'd said that over 100 years ago. A lie told often enough becomes the truth. And so, he's convinced many Russians that the West is evil, that NATO is evil, that the US is trying to put Russia in a corner, these kinds of things. But on the US side, there is also some misunderstanding, I think. I think, first of all, it's hard for Americans to comprehend a system of government like they have. I mean, having a dictatorship, I think for many Americans, they just have a hard time imagining what it's like where you don't have the basic freedom to say what you think about something. So that's why I write these books, to try to engage people in a little bit of the history that hopefully will lead them to explore a little bit of what Russia today is also like.
Yeah, I think that's critical. I mean, it is so important. And getting younger people, or just people, as you say, in general, people in the United States, to understand what dictatorships are if they haven't experienced it in any way, and how important history is, which is obviously what your book is about, but getting younger people interested in history. I mean, everything is now. There's an immediacy to everything that we do, and they're not interested in history. How we can, I mean, this sounds pretty basic, but how we can learn from it, which is what you're saying. But how do you, yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you
How
do
do you
that?
do that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And as you say, and it's just, the dictator, I mean, I was in Cuba, and my partner, he and I were we were in a hotel, and 24/7, it was just Castro, that's all that was on. There was one channel and he was it. And that was it. And it was all, yeah. And
Yeah, and actually, I would argue of everything that Putin and other dictators do, controlling the information is critical. And that's even more so in this day and age. Just a few weeks ago, Putin announced that all cell phones sold in Russia, which are only Russian-made cell phones, they will contain an app. And that app will take the place of things like WhatsApp or Telegram that have allowed Russians to communicate with people in Europe. So now those last avenues of communication are being closed off. So it is so important to understand, to have some information. And truthfully, I do think in general, the U.S. education system is a very, very good one. But I think in this, especially surrounding World War II, we fail a bit because we have not educated our young people. And even for me also, I mean, we learned about World War II, but we learned the U.S. and Western perspective. We learned nothing about the Eastern Front and the horrific sacrifices that the Soviets made. And you really have to start with World War II to understand Putin and what he's trying to do. Because World War II, from their perspective, they defeated Nazi Germany. They lost 28 million people. The United States lost 420,000. And, from their perspective, it was their sacrifice that achieved that victory over Germany. And for Putin, that's the beginning of the apex of Soviet power that continued then through the space race and the Soviets getting nuclear weapons in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. And then it wasn't until the 70s really when the state-run economy just was faltering so badly and couldn't, really was going nowhere. But so Putin's perspective starts from that point, really, I think, from World War II.
Are there, I mean, I'm an optimist, but are there younger people, are there tech people? This is, in your opinion, in the Soviet Union who can, counteract or mitigate some of this stuff? You're talking about
there
yeah.
are certainly. I mean, no one really knows the numbers. I read people say, oh, it's 20% actually of the population, a sizable number but they've been driven underground, right? They've been driven. They very, very much have to hide what they do, and another large portion of kind of people, open-minded Russians, fled the country, over 1 million, right? When the war started, when Russia attacked Ukraine first. So they've had this big brain drain, as it were. So right now, Putin's strategy of distraction for his population has been a very, very effective one. And I don't see a revolution coming anytime soon. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, what do you think that AI is going to do, or what's the impact? Well, here in the United States and also in Russia. Well, it's in Russia.
The impact of what?
AI.
Oh, yeah. That I really, really don't know, because I do think Putin will find ways to control the access to all of that as well. He's shutting down all VPNs in the country, which, I laugh because, I mean, I do know how to use a VPN. I have one, but most people my age, and certainly in Russia, they do not know how to use a VPN or how to get.
Tell everybody.
So it's a virtual network, and what it allows you to do is run your internet through a different site. So in Russia, for example, people can use a site that's in Western Europe, and they can get information that way. But now Putin is shutting all of those down. So he's working very hard to control advances like that. And I would assume also with AI, I mean, I would assume that is something that, that he can shut down within the country. I really don't know for sure, but given the progress he's making in controlling things like cell phone apps, messaging apps that would allow you to communicate with the rest of the world, and now and also shutting down VPNs, I would imagine there will be some restrictions on AI as well. I have no idea though. I really don't.
And doesn't that make him, in the long run, or maybe even in the short run, doesn't that make him even weaker? Because he's going to have a country who doesn't have access to all, all the information that we're talking about, whereas we hopefully continue to have access to that information in in Western countries and even China.
Right. Well, I do think it will in the long run, but I think he it doesn't see that we need to be engaged with, that his country needs to be engaged with the rest of the world necessarily, with the West in particular. He's finding ways to engage with other countries, with, of course, with China, North Korea, Iran, but also India and, other nations that he can engage with. And he hopes to continue to have a certain amount of economic growth. I mean, the economy has declined because of the war and because of sanctions, but I would say it hasn't declined enough to cause a change, right? In either in Putin's direction or in the policies that he's implementing. So I don't see. I mean, it would take the West really would have to have the support of certain countries like India, who import tons and tons of Russian oil and gas. So, I mean, crippling the Russian economy is one step towards ending the war and towards changing things. But truthfully, I think the only way to end the war, now I'm headed in a different direction, but the only way to end the war in Ukraine is militarily. There has to be, we have to arm Ukraine to the teeth. And that's really the only way that Russia's going to pay enough of a price to stop the war there. But I didn't mean to jump into another. Sorry.
Oh, no, but that's an interesting topic. So you're saying in your opinion, militarily is the only way to stop him. We have to do that in a military way. So, and how long, what's your let's say we do that, or that does happen. What kind of a time frame?
Oh, no idea about that, because of course, right now the wherewithal is not there to arm Ukraine to that degree. Although just recently, that there is this network. The European countries are arming Ukraine, and we're kind of going through them to also arm Ukraine. We'll see how that develops. It's just started, so I don't think there's any knowing, how much or how that will impact things. It is true, though, that, the resources aren't endless for Russia either. Its economy is about 11th in the world. It has, I don't know, 145 million people. Canada, who has 40 million people, has a bigger economy than Russia. So it's not. Its economy is moving along, but kind of very slowly and grinding slower because of the costs of the war. But I personally don't think, economic sanctions. I suppose if we could get India and almost every country in the world, except for China, North Korea would never agree. But if everyone stopped importing Russian oil and gas, that perhaps could, really speed things along. But personally, I think it's going to take, it has to be a military defeat. Russia has to see the possibility of defeat, and right now it does not. So,
what about the relationship, or can you describe the relationship? I mean, as you see it, between Putin and Trump?
Oh, well, I am not an expert on their relationship, but I do think the Alaska summit was a disaster from the moment Putin got what he wanted, the moment he stepped on that red carpet. All Putin wanted is he looks back to the days of the Soviet Union when it was a bipolar world. It was the US and the USSR, the big boys running everything, right?
Yeah,
And
the Cold War.
that's right, the Cold War. And that's what he wants. Again, he wants it to be, the West and Russia, right? Or the US and Russia. So he got what he wanted just by appearing there. And I do think Trump is very naive about Putin. And I mean, that I don't know if it's that. I mean, I rack my brain about the people advising him. Do these people have no background in Russia? Do they not understand? But if you do look at the list of people who work for Trump, they are not, I would say, well-schooled or well-educated in Soviet history, in Russian history, even in Putin's own personal history. So I think there's something definitely lacking in the US approach to Putin. And it starts with information. It starts with understanding what Putin wants.
Yeah. So how do we do? I mean, it's so, I agree with you. And from what little I know, obviously you're the expert, but it's so frustrating and it's so, it's scary, really, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
yeah.
It really is. It really is. I think, you can't, you don't just gain this knowledge about another country overnight. You need a president needs unless he's a Russian expert himself, which is Trump is nothing like a Russian expert. But you have to bring people in who have lived there, who have been diplomats there, who maybe tried to run businesses there in the 90s when things were chaotic and have an idea for how Russian culture works. But Trump refuses to do all that because I don't know, Trump, he thinks he knows best. So
Yeah, and knows everything about everything,
about everything,
about
yeah.
everyone.
Yeah, he really does not know Russia at all. And he definitely doesn't know Putin. But there are a lot of people in the US, there are a lot of experts who are constantly railing on this and saying, oh my gosh, I turned off my phone.
I can hear you.
I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
No.
I hear a little bit of background stuff, but I hear you.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I have a phone that I turned
It's
on
okay.
airplane
Well,
mode, but my computer is doing it, so that's the problem.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left, but because I do have one last question though. Like, is there, and you started to touch on that, are there a group of those people? I mean, obviously you've written your book and you talk to people who get together or who have some kind of impact or influence on the, I guess, the going politics in relation to Putin. I mean, yeah.
I think there are some fabulous voices out there. I think Timothy Snyder, who is a Yale historian, probably is the most knowledgeable person in the United States about that part of the world, Eastern Europe as well as Russia. Masha Gessen is an amazing journalist who has written a couple of fabulous books about Putin, and she herself is Russian. Timothy Snyder is not, and so there are journalists and educators and like those two people who know really everything you need to know, but the administration does not listen to those people. And there really are a lot of people in the US who are extremely knowledgeable about Russia and about Putin, but there is no interest out of the White House in it, it seems. So,
Well, you have to get out there.
well,
That interest.
I'm just trying to, I'm trying to do another kind of small way. I mean, I do talk about this to small groups and professional organizations and things, but, I feel like, by writing historical novels that are engaging, I can also get people interested in the subject and involved. And, so So that's a different way of trying to, trying to change things a little bit, trying to,
I mean, that's a really good way. So I do want to mention the book again, The Communist Secret. And I've been talking to the author, Suzanne Perry, really interesting. So Suzanne, to continue the conversation with any of my listeners or people who want, what platforms can we go to?
Well, I'm on Instagram
Okay.
and also Facebook, but I my website is Suzanne Perry Writes, WRITES.com, and that is a good way to find out what I'm doing. And I do have a few book events. Most of those book events are in the Pacific Northwest, but I do have a couple in October in Boston, or in Massachusetts, I should say, in the Boston area. So people can find out about that. And I'm always love to get emails or messages from people. I speak to book groups. I do all sorts of things like that. So
Great. Thanks. Really, thanks so much for being on the show today. It was a great conversation.
thank you, Kathryn. I really
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and me as well. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.